Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This video is just going to be an update on a few small changes and additions to the puffer jacket. You'll have to watch the original video or the original tutorial for more in-depth instructions for the pattern and how to put the jacket together. So if you'd like to see the few changes that I've made, just continue watching. Alright guys, let's get started. Here I'll be using about 2 to 2.5 yards of this hot pink peach fuzz fabric, about 2 to 2.5 yards of this lightweight pink silk for the lining, and 2 to 2.5 yards of quilt batting. I also have some elastic for the wristbands, and I'll be using a 30-inch separating zipper. Remember, the length of the zipper has to align with the length of your jacket from the top collar to the bottom of the opening of the jacket. For this particular jacket, I did use a puffer jacket that I have to trace for the pattern. In the original tutorial, I used a regular hoodie sweater, which will still work fine. Just like in the original tutorial, I fold the jacket in half to the front and trace around. Then I fold the jacket in half to the back and trace around. After that, I trace the sleeve, making sure to trace straight down from the inner seam, then trace across the seam right above the cuff. Now this hood is a bit different, being that it has two side panels and one along the center. For the center panel, I lay the hood as flat as I can to the back. I use a seam ripper to poke through the seams along both sides of the center panel to indicate those lines onto the craft or pattern paper. Then I trace along the top to indicate the stopping point. I flip the hood over and line the top of the center panel along with the stopping point from the back and continue poking through the side seams with my seam ripper onto the craft or pattern paper. For the side panels, I just trace around the seams using my seam ripper along the neckline. If you want to keep it simple, you can just lay your hoodie down in half and trace around it just like I did in the original tutorial. For this jacket, I will be including a collar. Since this jacket already comes with a collar, I just traced and adjusted the measurements for my own. If your jacket or hoodie does not have a collar, you can still measure and trace to create your own. To measure the length at the bottom of the collar, just measure along or around the neckline of the jacket or the hoodie. I wanted to make my collar a bit higher, so I added a few inches to the height. For me, that was about 3 inches. For the measurement at the top of the collar, I measure around my head where I want the height or the collar to stop. Then I center that measurement from the center of the collar so that it is equal on both sides and trace across. Here is the front pattern piece. To this, I added 4 inches to the bottom to make the jacket longer. Remember, the front pattern piece will be cut into 2 separate pieces, so I make sure to add the 1/2 inch seam allowance around the whole pattern piece. For the back pattern piece, I add 4 inches to the bottom as well, and this will be cut into one piece on the fold down the center. Here's the sleeve pattern. I cut 2 separate pieces on the fold. I have the pattern for the center panel of the hoodie that will be cut into one piece, and the side panel pattern that will be cut into 2 separate pieces. If you opted to fold your hood in half, you would only need one pattern piece from half of the hoodie, and that would be cut into 2 separate pieces. For the collar pattern, I divided the measurements in half so that I can cut this on a fold. I'll be cutting 2 separate pieces for the collar. Lastly, I have the wristband pattern. For the measurements, I use the end of the sleeve pattern for the width measurement, and I measure 6 inches down for the length. I cut all my patterns for the outer jacket, the lining, and the batting at 3 layers for each pattern piece. Now I'll go ahead and prepare the outer jacket, the hood, and the lining. All these steps you can find in the original puffer jacket tutorial in detail. I'll link that tutorial in the card in the upper right hand corner. Then I'll come back and show you how I added the collar and continue on to the updated finishings as well. Here I have the prepared outer jacket. I've also included pockets. If you would like to add pockets as well, please refer back to the original puffer jacket tutorial for more instructions on that. I have the prepared lining, and as you can see, I've replaced 2 inches of the bottom of the lining with the outer fabric. This is completely optional, so you can skip this step if you like. I've also added one of the outer collar pieces to the lining as well. To do that, I just lined the bottom of the outer collar with the neckline of the lining, front facing in, and sew together with a straight stitch. Next, I grab my prepared hood piece, the collar piece, back facing up, then line the 3 batting pieces on top. I take the jacket folded in half and pin at the center point around the neckline. Then I take the hood and fold it in half at the bottom and pin at the center point. Lastly, I take the collar and the batting pieces, fold them in half and pin at the center point at the bottom of the collar. I line the front of the collar piece against the lining of the hood and pin together at the center point. Then I line the back of the hood against the back of the neckline and pin all of the pieces together at the center point. I continue to line and pin all pieces together on both sides. Then sew together with the straight stitch. After attaching the hood and collar pieces onto the jacket, I attach one side of the separating zipper to one side of the opening of the jacket. To do that, I line the zipper 1 inch above the jacket and line the jacket and the straight edge of the zipper line with the raw edge of the opening of the jacket. I line it from the bottom of the jacket all the way to the top of the collar. Remember, the length of the opening of the jacket, including the collar, will determine the length of the zipper you will need. In my case, my collar ended up being a little longer than the zipper, but that's okay. I just cut the collar down a 1/2 inch above the zipper, and I'll show you how I did that a little later. I attached the other half of the zipper on the other side, then zip the jacket up to make sure the zipper placement is where I need it to be. That looks good to me, so I move on and attach the cuffs. Again, you can watch the original tutorial for the detailed steps on how to attach the cuffs. When that's done, I take the jacket and turn it wrong side out and grab the lining of the jacket and turn that right side out. Here on one of the sleeves, I left about a 5 to 6 inch opening, which will help with finishing towards the end. Now I take the collar of the lining and line it with the collar of the jacket, right sides facing in. On the side of the collar, I pin a 1/2 inch above where the zipper stops and pin both of the collar pieces together at that point as well. I do the same for the other side. I line and pin the collar seam of the lining and the jacket together, then continue pinning the side of the opening of the lining and the jacket. I do the same for the other side. I start sewing the lining and the jacket together down one side of the opening. When I get to the collar, I sew across where the 2 pins are marked above the zipper. I just did this by eye, but you can mark a line across the collar connecting those 2 points to help guide you across as you sew. After that, I sew down the other side of the opening, and this is all sewn with one continuous straight stitch. When that's sewn together, here is where I will cut the excess collar off. I also cut the corners of the collar right above the stitch. Now here's where I finish the cuffs a little differently. I take the sleeve of the lining, which is wrong side out. Then I pull up the excess seam allowance from the cuff and push the cuff itself back into the sleeve. I take the end of the sleeve of the lining and line the seam from the inside of the sleeve with the seam inside of the excess seam allowance of the cuff and pin together. I continue to pin those two together all the way around. Then sew around together with a straight stitch. Here's what I have after sewing them together. From the bottom of the opening of the jacket, I reach through the sleeve, grab the cuff, and pull the sleeves right side out. As you can see, that gives the seam allowance a much cleaner finish. I go ahead and reach inside of the jacket and push out the corners of the collar and pull out the top of the zippers as well. To keep the lining along the collar in place, I line and pin the excess seam allowance along the collar of the lining and the excess seam allowance along the collar of the jacket together. Then I sew both pieces together with a straight stitch right above the collar stitch of the jacket. When that's done, I keep the jacket and lining turned wrong side out. I line the bottom of the jacket with the lining and sew in from both sides, leaving about an 8 to 10 inch opening in the center. After sewing the sides together, I pull the jacket right side out from the opening at the bottom. I also make sure to pull out the bottom ends of the zipper along each side of the bottom opening of the jacket corners. I find the opening at the sleeve lining from before and pull that out. From that opening, I reach inside and find the opening at the bottom of the jacket and pull that out through the opening of the sleeve. If you need, you can make the opening of the sleeve bigger by using your seam ripper and cutting a few stitches of the thread on each side of the opening. When I pull the bottom through the opening of the sleeve, I find the opening of the bottom of the jacket and pin it together with the bottom lining. Then I sew the opening closed with a straight stitch. After sewing that closed, I push it back into the opening of the sleeve and straighten it out a bit along the bottom hem. Lastly, I find the opening of the sleeve and top stitch the opening with a straight stitch along the edge. Here is that opening closed. Next, I pull the sleeve right side out. I also added a top stitch along the zippers. And when that's done, the jacket is now complete. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.